Welcome to the PMI Talk Show, your go-to space for conversations that inspire, educate, and energize the world of project management. Brought to you by PMI Netherlands Chapter, we're here to explore big ideas, practical solutions, and the human side of getting things done. Guided by PMI Global's values of innovation, collaboration, and impact, we promise to keep it fun, insightful, and full of fresh perspectives. I am Shalini Manshramani, your host for this journey, and I'm super thrilled to have you on board. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, join us as we turn challenges into opportunities, one project at a time. Our guest tonight is Kelly Swart. Kelly is a project and program management consultant and strategy facilitator focused on helping leaders close the gap between strategy and execution. As a former board member at PMI Netherlands Chapter, she led the professional development portfolio for 2 years, currently serving as a member of PMI's Next Gen Outreach Committee, where they focus on career-long learning and development for students and aspiring project professionals. Kelly, have I missed anything about you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be hosted by my former chapter. I work with leaders and teams who are navigating complex decisions and big deliverables. My focus is really on helping people get clear, not just on what needs to be done, but on the impact their work is meant to deliver. And that's why I'm so excited about this topic, because strategic leadership isn't just about delivery, it's about direction, clarity, and the value we're here to create.
Thank you for being here, Kelly. Today's conversation will indeed explore the evolving role of the project leader in today's complex, value-driven environment. And Kelly, I'm especially eager to dive into this theme, looking into how strategic leadership begins long before execution, actually, at the point of defining the business problem and shaping the vision. And furthermore, I'm keen on uncovering PMI's M.O.R.E framework as a lens. So discussing how leaders can deliver greater alignment, adaptability, and long-term value. So to kick it off, what is strategic leadership? What does it really mean?
I think you've raised a valuable point. We've reached a point where managing projects just isn't enough. There's too much complexity and too much at stake. So leadership today requires more than delivery. It requires direction. Strategic leadership is about shaping the path forward, not just following the plan. And that's why I'm excited about this conversation, because strategy isn't something we can afford to treat as a side conversation anymore. It has to be embedded into how we think, how we lead, and even how we execute every single day.
So what does it look like in the context of project delivery?
Great question. Strategic leadership to me is about seeing the project not as an isolated initiative, but as a vehicle to create real, lasting value. It's not about how efficiently we move through a plan, but rather about what the plan actually creates. That means shifting the kinds of questions we ask from the start. Instead of just jumping straight into scope, we sometimes need to pause and ask, what outcomes are we really aiming for? Are we investing our time and talent where it truly matters? And is this project aligned with the bigger picture? What's the business impact? When we lead with that kind of clarity, we stop chasing checklists and start creating value. It's a shift from managing delivery to owning direction. And that shift changes everything: how we plan, how we lead conversations, how we measure success, and how we show up inside our organizations.
So Kelly, what you're trying to say is, as a project manager, before you dive into the project requirements, it is best to get a higher and big picture understanding of what is to come and what impact it is going to have for the future once the project is done, right? So you need to think ahead.
Absolutely. And there's this gap I see over and over again, the space between strategy and execution. We all start with a great vision, but somewhere between intention and implementation, the focus shifts. So instead of leading toward impact, we get so caught up in delivery mode. just trying to stay on track, hit the milestones, stay within scope. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And for decades, that's how project success has been measured: scope, time, and cost. The triple constraints we all know about. But in today's environment, I don't think that's longer enough. I think a project can be delivered on time and on budget and still miss the mark entirely. Because if it doesn't solve the right problem, it doesn't generate the real business value, then what have we actually achieved?
So you suggest looking beyond the triple constraint, which is scope, schedule, cost. What elements how would you restructure this framework then?
I think that's where the M.O.R.E framework from PMI really stands out. It was created to reflect a shift in how we define project success and how we define the impact on our profession as a whole. Because more isn't about doing more work. It's about doing work that actually delivers more success in very real ways, driving financial value by translating strategy into execution and leveraging the technology. And I love that it captures this broader, more strategic view of leadership, one that moves us beyond timelines and deliverables and into direction, alignment, and value creation. So, shall we talk a little more about M.O.R.E?
Yes, indeed, of course. I'm more curious, and especially our audience, to know what exactly M.O.R.E stands for and why is it M-O-R-E?
The first element is manage perceptions. It's powerful because it recognizes that value isn't just created, it's also interpreted. Strategic leaders understand that success is often subjective. It's shaped by what stakeholders expect, what they experience, and how well those things align. So it's not enough to just deliver results. We have to manage the story of those results. That means being intentional about what success looks like, how it's communicated, and how we align our expectations early on, not just at the end of the project. It's about creating clarity before the project even begins, and then revisiting that clarity throughout the whole process. The second is own project success. It's about accountability, not just for delivery, but for results. It's easy to say, I finished the project, my job is done. But strategic leaders don't stop at handover. They take ownership of whether the project actually delivered value, whether it solved the right problem, created the intended benefits, and moved the needle in this real world that we live in. And that ownership starts early by defining success clearly and aligning the work with outcomes that actually matter. The third one is relentlessly reassess. And I think this is one that separates rigid project plans from adaptive leadership. Now we're going into the agility aspect. Strategic leaders don't just set a course and stick to it no matter what happens. They keep checking in. They challenge new assumptions because things change. We know it. Priorities shift, new risks emerges, opportunities appear. And reassessment is sometimes perceived as a weakness. And I don't understand why, because it's a sign of strength. It means you're paying attention. It means you're staying aligned and adjusting course when needed to protect the value of the project. And when that mindset is part of your culture, you're not just delivering, you're actually evolving. And then finally, we get expand perspective. This is where strategic leadership really takes shape, because when you're stuck in the details, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. Strategic leaders in that sense needs to zoom out and start asking questions like, where does this project fit into our long-term goals? What's changing in the market? And what does the customer actually need right now? It's not just about what's on the task list. It's about context, connection, and contribution. I love those 3 C's of context, connection, and contribution. It's something I use often. So in expanding perspectives, it helps us to lead with more clarity, more alignment, and more intention.
Right. Well, very beautifully put, Kelly. And all while you were trying to explain this, I was trying to reflect to how this comes into the PMBOK guide, because this is what we it's not a prescriptive guide, but it's sort of the way we do project management according to PMI. So if I look at manage expectations, ownership, reassess, and expand perspectives, it's all part of the monitoring and control phase. So is this where we see the rise of the strategic leader to really go beyond and deliver value to the client or the respective customer?
Yeah, absolutely. The PMBOK is created by the community, by practitioners. And in real project settings, leading with more doesn't start when the project plan is locked in.
Mm-hmm.
It actually starts when the business problem, the opportunity or the initial vision is created. With that very first conversation about why a project should exist in the first place. You know, strategic leaders needs to step in early and help shape that conversation, not just execute on decisions that's already been made. So often as project managers, we're just handed our charters and, okay, go off and execute.
Mm.
And I think the work that I do with leaders, for instance, often starts at the very beginning when we're still defining the business problem or clarifying the original vision.
Mm.
It shows up in how we frame the problem, how we shape the expectations, how we define what success will actually mean. The definition of done and the definition of success are two very separate concepts. So it's about holding perspective, not just on what we're building, but on why it matters and who it's meant to serve. Don't forget that part. I mean, the shift comes from managing output to leading with context, clarity, and intention. And when we lead from that space, we stop measuring success by completion, but rather start measuring it by contribution. And I think that's powerful.
Yes, indeed. And I think you're right in putting it that way, that it's not only during the monitor phase or the execution phase, it's even before that, so from the initiation to the setup of the project, to the execution, to the closing of the phase. So each phase, I think if I look at it from my perspective, if you look it as more into the each phase, if you add the more perspective into each phase, then you have an overall beautiful project delivery, right?
True, very true.
So Kelly, can you explain to me what it was like working on a real life project without knowing the M.O.R.E framework? So the pre-M.O.R.E framework, what it was like working, how did you solve challenges back then? And then my next follow-up question is going to be, what if you added the M.O.R.E perspective during that time? How would have things looked differently?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I would say one that stands out to me is I was leading a business transformation project for a multinational organization, going through a legal entity and a brand change. And on paper, it looked very operational, but in reality, it was cultural. People had new titles, new responsibilities, new systems, even new tools were used, so everything shifted. And when a company changes, people's lives get disrupted. What made it complex wasn't just the scope, but the human side of change. And I think this is where M.O.R.E becomes very valuable. If we applied M.O.R.E in that scenario, we made sure that change management wasn't a side stream, it was central. Our project plan had clear strategic objectives focused on the people, clarity, communication, and business continuity. That's what allowed us to deliver a successful transformation without any business downtime, which these days is really hard to pull off, but feasible and possible if you make sure that M.O.R.E frameworks or strategic objectives are integrated into the project vision.
Interesting. In my opinion, nowadays everything is so fast-paced, So how do you, I think it comes, perhaps it also streamlines with our next question. How do strategic leaders stay inclusive without slowing down momentum in fast-moving environments? And how can they incorporate the M.O.R.E framework?
Yeah, that's such a valuable question to ask.
Because let
Inclusivity
me add
means
something, because dealing with people requires time and patience, especially when you build that trust. So I feel like we're trying to juggle with complex variables here, and I mean, project
absolutely,
manager, we
absolutely.
always shuffle that.
Yeah, I mean, inclusivity means leading with a broader lens, right? Not just towards outcome, but towards the people who shape them.
Mm.
So strategic leaders don't lead in isolation. They build alignment upwards with sponsors, executives, and decision makers. And then they create space downwards for the teams, the voices, and the insights to surface meaningfully. It shows up in, if we look at upwards, ensuring that sponsors are part of shaping the value, not just approving all the deliverables. If we look at downwards, it's making sure that those closest to the work have clarity, context, and a say in shaping that outcomes. And there's even lateral, bringing in diverse perspectives that can reframe how success is defined or how problems are understood. We have subject matter expertise on the team for a reason. So it's not about consensus, it's about connection and alignment. Strategic leaders include the people who matter at the moment that it matters. That's how they lead with clarity and accountability.
Very well put. You make it sound so simple, yet it doesn't feel like.
It's not, but it's feasible.
Yes, I hope so. And I wish that more leaders today start using the M.O.R.E framework and become more empathetic in the way of dealing.
Yeah, I think PMI did a really great job in capturing that as a whole,
Mm.
not only to the project management profession, but to leadership. I think
Mm.
it's valuable.
Kelly, we're coming almost to the end of our podcast. I think a few last questions to you. What do you think is the future of project management?
I really like that question, and I wish I had a globe to kind of see into the future. But for me, the future of project management isn't about more tasks or tighter timelines, deadlines. It's more about impact and alignment, more leadership. Strategically, it starts before the project does. It presents in how we define the problem, how we shape our priorities, and connect our work to real world outcomes. That means success won't just be measured in what gets delivered, but by what gets realized. You know, customer satisfaction, strategic positioning, business growth. And that's where the more mindset becomes so important because it's not about doing more, it's about creating more of what matters.
Creating and delivering more.
Absolutely. And when we lead with clarity, context, and purpose, we elevate not just our projects, but the role of project leadership itself.
Mm. Very thoughtfully put. Lastly, do you have any message for our young professionals or project management community?
Yes, always. And thank you again for having me. This has been such a meaningful conversation. So, to every emerging leader in this space, your role is bigger than the plan. You don't have to wait for a title to lead strategically. You lead every time you ask a better question, when you bring clarity to the conversation or connect your work to a larger purpose. So keep expanding your perspective, stay curious, and don't underestimate the impact you can have when you lead with intention.
Wow, so thoughtfully and cleverly put out there, Kelly. I must say, thank you so much for this engaging and unfiltered conversation, Kelly. It was truly a pleasure having you on the PMI Talk Show. I believe our conversation truly highlighted the importance of leading projects with perspective and not just plans. So, to our listeners, just take a seat back and reflect on why you are doing this and what impact will it bring to the
Yeah,
public
thank you.
stakeholders.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Until next time, stay inspired, stay innovative, and keep making an impact.